Welcome to Crimson Guitars, welcome to a Patreon Q&A. I'm going to answer 4 or 5 long, big questions today. So yeah, buckle up. This first one is from Bill Kern. He says, "Hi, I'm looking into building a workbench for my shop. I have been using a retail workbench for over a year, and while it is fine for using power tools like the grinder and random orbital sander, it's not sturdy enough to use a hand plane or chisels and gouges. I bought the book Workbenches from Design and Theory to Construction and Use, fantastic book, that you recommended, and have been reading through it. It really is a very good book. My question is, what are the features that you find you cannot live without when it comes to your bench, and what features do you see as unnecessary?" First of all, it could be possible, unless you want 2 benches, it could be possible to upgrade the bench that you have. And it would certainly be a lot easier than making a new one from scratch. So I would consider that. If you have a flimsy standard workbench, something that a lot of people will do is take the bottom shelf out, make a box where the shelf has been, and fill that with bags of sand, for example. In fact, I've got this bench here, and it's a little bit narrow, so it's a little bit unsteady when I'm really getting into planing, and I need to weight it down. You basically, with some screws and wood and sand, you can take a commercial workbench that's relatively inexpensive and relatively flimsy and beef it up. So that's option number 1. In fact, I mentioned that in one of the videos I've just done. However, features that I cannot live without on a bench is a good front vise. Where I'm standing, and this is predominantly because a lot of the time I'm on video, I will do all of my jointing along the front of the bench. And wherever the vise happens to be, for me, right-handed, closer to this end is probably better. But I have a lot of space, so I use this vise a lot. In fact, I'm upgrading. I've got a wooden one here that's got the 2 sort of racks, and it's not that good. I'm going to be replacing this with a big, chunky record at some point very soon. It appears to have been stolen, actually. Damn it. I had a vise in here and it's gone. So that's essential, and what I find is not essential at this point is the vise on the end of the bench. I used to use my end vise all the time, and what it is actually how your workshop is set up. My old workshop, I used to have the videos here, but I used to do a lot of work at the end of the bench working this way, and I'm analysing myself here. I think because my bench is a little bit unstable because it doesn't have weight on the bottom, but it's very heavy on the top. Planing across on the end vise, that makes the bench more unstable, therefore I don't use it very much. I have several other clamps. I've got this Taranti Carver's vise permanently set up here. I can take it off if I really need to, and I have a couple of smaller engineer's vices on the other end for doing nut work and stuff like that. But the other piece that is essential that you will not have in a commercial bench is, excuse me, your top isn't solid in the commercial bench. You tend to have rails around the side, and then it's hollow, and when you're clamping down to it, the bottom of the clamp twists in. So as far as I'm concerned, whether it is a solid wood bench or possibly a bench made using torsion box construction, which is where you basically make a frame, put a lot of sort of wedges in between, or dwangs if you're Scottish, and then you face it with 2 pieces of ply. That's a very stable top. As long as the top and the bottom are strong enough to take a clamp. I like to be able to clamp anywhere on the bench, and I couldn't actually survive without bench dogs. Bench dogs? crikey, I've been talking for too long. This is the third Patreon video I've done on the trot, and I'm now starting to flag. Yeah, so I've said I don't use my end vise, and I don't use my end vise to hold work in the actual vise, but I do use it to hold the dogs that close on longer pieces of wood. So that's it. I mean, weight and stability are most important. The heavier you can make it, whether it is through using solid woods or through weighting it up with sand in the bottom, for example, that is absolutely essential. The vices you choose, if you have the option, go for really good old quality records, quick release vices. A quick release vice is amazing. Or if you really want to go full whole hog, bench crafted make fantastic vices, and those are well worth looking at. Now, one thing that I have had and dislike intensely is a tool well. I've never had one in the middle. I've always had a tool well at the back of the bench, and it is just a place in which to collect dirt and dust and random tools. I hate that. I would rather be able to clear my entire bench off, have it perfectly clean, and then put a whatever I'm working on it. So I don't do that. I don't have the rack at the end, the back of the bench to put tools in. I'd much rather having the tools easy to hand behind me. It also looks much better on the videos. And I also don't like the idea of drawers and things built into the front of the bench. If you have limited space, which most people do for workshops, especially at home, then you might not have a choice. I personally, however, don't like... I think drawers are a place where tools go to die, basically. And he says, 1, 2, 3, 4... I have 4 drawer units behind my bench. And 2 of them, I've got 5. 3 of them are full of things that I haven't seen in a year. So actually should be got rid of, really. Anyway, there we go. Sorry, that was long. So yeah, Bill, thank you very much for your support and for your question. Okay, Candy has a question. Says, hi Ben, new Patreon sub here. I've recently found your channel and subsequently your store and am in love with your products. Very good start. Any chance you'll have cam clamps in stock? Damn it. And they have a question. Cam clamps is something... I'm actually fairly sure that we've prototyped them. I need to go downstairs and talk to Ian. Ian was working on that. It's something I want to do, and it's something we can do. It's something I have made in the past. I think we're going to be making cam clamps with a threaded system, and but don't hold your breath. If you need them now, go to what's the company? Let me have a quick look at brands. I can't see any branding on there. That's terrible. Anyway, yeah, you can get wherever you are in the world. You don't have to go to StewMac. There are more inexpensive, well-made cam clamps around. It will be a number of months before we're able to go into full production of ours. Although we will be doing smaller ones for fine luthiers work at some point soon. Anyway, how to get wood, har har. Seriously though, I love the word har har written with the R's. It's good. Seriously though, I'm having trouble sourcing good quality timber for my first build. Since I'm just starting out, I found body blanks on the internet, but I'm afraid of getting ripped off. I'm not exactly minted. I know that feeling. Also, how do you know? Here's a top tip if you want to run a business. It's not necessarily how much money you actually have. It's how it's looking like you have lots of money, because then people will give you more. And unfortunately, chasing that means that I've got this huge premises and lots of staff and expensive things like that. So personally, I'm poor as a bloody church mouse, but rich in experience and friends. No, they're staff, aren't they? There's a difference. I'm sad now. Sorry, I'm in a good mood. I'm trying to be funny and actually just coming across as wrong. Anyway, I found body blanks, not exactly minted. Also, how do you know if a piece of wood would make a good body, or maybe even a neck? Could I just grab an old piece of furniture and start carving? Yes, you can. There are good suppliers, and there are people that will rip you off. And people like David Dyke over at Luther's Supplies, his body blanks, his wood in general is expensive. You know, you're paying a little bit more for the pleasure of knowing that it is absolutely top quality timber. There are other places around the world that have good reputations, and have a look in the forums. There is, I think, a list of good suppliers there. Yes, buying a body blank or a neck blank on eBay, if you don't know the seller, that's scary. But there are Luther's companies and supply houses who are established, who you can go to and can trust. As to how do you know if wood is good enough for making a guitar out of, Fender made one out of cardboard. You know, as long as the timber is hard enough that when you push your finger into it or fingernail into it, it doesn't make a dent, or at least not very easily, you're pretty much sorted. It should be okay. You don't want any huge defects like our Raw Series guitars. We have to make sure that they have the defects that look good but are still stable. Yeah, it's a really difficult question, actually. Most wood is fine. Most wood is suitable for guitar building. Specifically bodies. Necks are a little bit more problematic. You want quarter sawn if you can get it, and you want straight grain, so you don't want any knots in a neck. I built a neck in my early career where halfway down it had a knot, and I thought, oh, well, it's pretty, that's fine. And then I built the neck, and of course, after I'd done all the carving, it twisted and moved around that knot, and I had to build another guitar. It was a through neck, and I only noticed after the wings and top and everything were on. It was horrific. So good, straight, clean-looking wood is perfectly fine, and you should be talking 30 or 40 pounds for a body, and 30 or 40 pounds for a neck, really. If you're starting out, do not fall into the trap of using the cheapest possible wood available. Don't go for construction grade timber, pine and stuff like that. You will never get a good finish. You will never get something that you are happy with, period. Just don't do it. A standard ash body blanket, about 30 pounds from a good supplier. My prices are probably completely off, 50 pounds maybe, but still, it's, you know, a day's work to get something that you know will be right. And make sure that it's a good supplier who's nice and dry. The supplier needs to be dry as well as the wood. Yeah, a good dry sense of humor is rather important. Okay, Candy again, another question. Relative humidity in my workshop peaked at 70% yesterday due to faulty heating, which made me hastily purchase a second-hand dehumidifier. And now I'm wondering whether that was really a good move. Humidity is back down to 50%, but what value should I be aiming for? And what are the dangers of high or low relative humidity? It very much depends. You don't want the humidity to be too high across the board because your wood will never dry. So essentially you've got the relative humidity in the building or where you are working, and then you've got the relative humidity of where the guitar is going to live. And if the guitar is going to live in a place where it's 50% all the time, then you want the guitar to be built in a place where that is the relative humidity and stroke temperature. Temperature doesn't really affect it. Temperature doesn't affect the wood itself. It does affect the relative humidity though. So to actually give you a number and a figure, we're building guitars in a barn here. It's practically impossible to get it right. We really struggle with this. So what we've got is we've got a room downstairs where the relative humidity is actually sub 50%. We have heaters and dehumidifiers and things going in there all the time. And we will put guitars that we're working on in there whenever we're not working on them. Because that means that for most of the time they're in a low humidity place and the wood is staying dry and at the right sort of place or position for where it's going to live in the end. Now, yeah, I mean, that's it. It really is that simple. If you are at 70% all the time, then you've got a problem. And once you deliver the guitar, 3 weeks later, 6 weeks later, your fret ends are going to pop out of the side of the board. This happened to us with a batch of guitars that we sent to a shop. Unfortunately, we bought wood that we thought was dry, that we were told was dry, and it's very difficult to measure the moisture content of a fretboard because it's so thin, and we trusted our supplier. And we sent out a batch of guitars before we had everything stored in this room. And a month later, 6 weeks later, I had to drive from literally one end of the country to the other to personally dress all of the fret ends and polish them and make sure they were all good. That was a day. Anyway, so yeah, there we go. Try and keep it down if you can. However, momentary spikes are not really too much of an issue as long as it's not a regular thing. You want to keep it fairly constant. Okay. So, we have a question here from Craig Manson. He says, how do you ensure quality in what Crimson does? Do you have specific systems or processes in place, or is it just trust in the individuals working for Crimson? Recently, I was asked to repair a pretty new guitar from a major brand, Fender. I mean, he puts it in parentheses. The fault was that the hot lead from the tone pot to the output jack was not soldered properly to the tone pot and was shorting against the pot case. Surely some sort of quality control procedures should have picked this up. Yes, especially with a company like that. But do you have specific systems or processes in place? Yes. It is called fear of death. Yes and no. At every single stage, we will check an instrument, and the luthiers involved have to sign off on what they're building. Now, in fact, the guitar ships with a little hang tag, and it's got 5 or 6 different spots with different things that the people who've been building the guitar have to check, and they have to sign that they've checked. And we haven't had anything come back, but if we did, we'd look at that hang tag and say, hey, Tom, or whoever, you signed off on this and it's wrong. We're a small enough company that we can trust almost every single staff member. The boss is a little bit flaky, must be said. So yeah, quality control is a mindset, is a permanent thing with us here. And it goes across the board to the tools and things as well. We have very, very high standards, and we trust our staff to keep to them. Every now and then when we're training a new member of staff, that's a different story, and it's difficult, but then we check them more often. But we're building small enough batches, both of guitars and tools, that it's, I will see batches of tools go through, or see them on the workbench as I walk past and I'm talking to somebody about a prototype or something, and I'll say, yeah, that's not quite good enough. And that doesn't happen very often at all. So yeah, we have managers in place who are also makers, and yeah, we have to keep as good as humanly possible. That was a bad sentence. Quality control should be all over that sentence. There we go. Okay, I have one more question. No, I don't. No, I don't. Okay, Grimmer's Lock Deity. Fantastic name. I had a few questions. Any tips on Buckeye Burl? Stabilizing tips, coloring effects. I have a top I'm horrified of messing up. I have limited experience with Buckeye Burl. I'm building one guitar over here with a beautiful Buckeye top. It's fairly stable. What I've had to do, I routed the control cavity right through the body before I glued the top on. And there's a large control cavity. So at that point, it's a little bit thin. So what I did is I cut another veneer of about 3 mil, 4 mil thick and glued it into the bottom of the cavity to give it a little bit of strength there. The rest of the top is fairly stable though, and fairly strong. Sometimes it can be spongy, so it will take a dent from a thumbnail that you push into it. At that point, you've got several options. You can resin infuse your wood, and that is by dumping it in a vacuum chamber, pulling all the air out. Vacuum chamber with a special type of resin. You pull the air out, it goes into the wood and it makes it solid. That is impractical, especially if you are talking about a top, because, well, if you want to bend the top, so I've got the modern radius carve, or the drop top effect, once it's resin infused, it's not going to want to bend, for example, and you don't want to resin infuse an entire guitar. So what I tend to do is I use super glue, super thin super glue, first of all, and I'll flood the whole top with it, and then I'll go with a medium viscosity super glue to fill any gaps. The problem is it is toxic as hell. I mean, really, that much super glue flooded onto a guitar can do some serious damage to you. Do it outside on a not very windy day, because you don't want super glue blowing everywhere. Wear a gas mask, wear eye protection, etc. But also think about whether it's absolutely necessary. And I would do this after the top is on the guitar. You then also have to sand it back. And wood turners use a super glue finish a lot of the time. I've seen it on necks before as well, and you can get a fantastic finish actually using it as a film finish. But the process of actually sanding it down is also toxic as hell and to be avoided. The other issue is if you do that, you're not going to be able to stain it at all. And you mentioned here any tips for colouring and effects. With colouring and that, top tip is this fantastic company called Crimson Guitars. Go and check out their stains. Experiment. It is a grey, creamy sort of colour, so the stains will look on the grey parts darker than they normally do on a flame maple top, for example. So take some excess material and run a few tests. That really goes across the board, whatever you're staining. Okay, can stainless steel fret wire be coloured black? I have all black hardware and African blackwood fretboard. That's illegal now. African blackwood, I'm afraid. CITES, along with every single rosewood. No, it can't. We've looked into it. There really isn't any way. The only... Please excuse me. The only way you can get that sort of an effect with frets is if you have possibly forged yourself some Damascus steel frets or something like that. But, you know, other than that, the second you wear through it, which will be relatively rapidly, you can stain the outside of steel using various chemicals. You can possibly anodize it to a certain extent. I'm not sure if anodize is the right word. There are ways that you can get a thin film of color on the outside of things. You could blue stainless steel, I think, using fire and a bed of brass shavings. But it's only on the outside, and frets need to be leveled. Frets and the process of, you know, using the strings will cause some issues. So basically, no, not a chance. It's a cool idea, though, one that we have played with a lot and given lots of thought to. It's just sadly not possible. Crystal frets have been available. There are other synthetics that you could possibly try, but you're now talking about custom making frets. So, yeah, I wouldn't. Getting extra frets onto guitars, yes, you can do that. There are microtonal scales available. There are people that have made moving frets. It's literally just a case of drawing out where you want the line, making sure you know where you want the line, and cutting and working as normal. I wouldn't suggest going much higher than 24 frets. It's just impractical and not really useful. And that then also moves your neck pickup out of the way. And I really like the sound of a good neck pickup in the right position. Finally, you're insane. Thoughts on building a 5-piece neck that only the core laminate runs through the body? That's okay. You could do that. Other laminates end as a set neck. Also, laminates end at the nut stroke volute with a separate one-piece headstock. Okay, yes, you can do all of that actually. You have a single laminate that goes all the way through the body. Then, so essentially you glue wings onto that, and that's fine. Then you have to route a cavity into which the other laminates will go. And I don't know the practicality of that really, but it's possible. I mean, it's not insurmountable. And then at the other end, it's actually quite easy. You've got your multi-laminate neck that finishes at the nut, and you just do a standard scarf joint. Put a solid piece on and go like that. I have done a scarf joint where I jointed a Perspex headstock onto a wooden neck before. And I've done a rosewood headstock onto a flame maple neck before as well. That was a very dicey decision choice. That's what happens when you are a very, very young guitar builder with no money who happens to desperately want to use a piece of rosewood that had been lying around for a while. So actually possible, a little bit harder to visualize on the first read through, but yeah, possible. Is there a reason, as a budding guitar builder, try and avoid overcomplicating things just for fun? If you have a valid reason for a decision, then cool. And I'm not saying that an awesome look is not a valid reason. I'm not saying that at all. I've made lots of decisions based on guitars, on specific instruments, based entirely on how it looks. But make sure that you really want that look before you totally overcomplicate the build process itself, because it might well throw up limitations in your tools, in your current skill level, etc., that you don't want to really push at that stage. So yeah, it's possible, and it's something that you should be able to do, but just be wise about it. And this is now me talking to everybody. Don't push yourself too hard. Push yourself, but not too far. There's nothing more soul-destroying than having a fantastically cool idea and trying to push the boundaries of guitar making, and you spend 10 years developing something, or we were talking about microtonal frets just now, something like that, or and then in the end you've invested so much thought and so much time and energy into this revolutionary thing, and you come to the realization that actually people want Teddies and Strats and Les Pauls, man. It sucks. People don't want 36 frets or 42 frets. They don't want microtonal systems. They don't want guitars where the frets are half fretted and half fretless, like Ibanez came out with last year. We're not interested in robot tuners or MIDI for that matter. At least most of us aren't. The Fernandez Sustainer sells a few thousand, or let's say a few thousand a year, whereas as does the Ebo. These things are fairly cool, but are they worth the amount of energy and effort put into them? Back on the true temperament frets, they've gone and worked out and worked and worked and worked, and that particular company have screwed themselves in the I was about to say they've screwed themselves in the foot. I have no idea where they came from, because the material that they're actually making the frets out of is substandard, or at least the material of the frets that we had for the one that we did, it was too soft. So it's just going to wear away. It's not good enough. So I developed a guitar when I started. I made 8 or 10 of these things. It was called the Eros, and it had very big spikes under here, which were both uncomfortable, and it looked like the guitar had 3 penises. You know, it was a poor choice. And I was saying to myself, seriously, yeah, I'm going to revolutionize guitar design because I've made a pointy guitar. Completely forgetting about BC Rich and the Iceman, although that's not really a pointy guitar, but you know what I mean. That sort of stuff. And I wasted so much time making that when the guitars that I was actually lusting after myself at that point weren't pointy guitars, they were PRSs. You know, spend more time perfecting your building and less time worrying about making an impact in the actual annals of design history, because chances are you're not. And chances are you're going to feel that you wasted your time 10 years, 15 years later, because I feel like I wasted a lot of my time doing a lot of the things that I've done. Wow, what a downer. Comments below. Anyway, look, thank you very much. You guys are awesome. I'm going to go and gargle a pint of water now because my throat is so dry. And yeah, I've got another 3 or 4 videos to film today. Fun times. In fact, really properly fun times. I really want to go and do some work on the 90-hour builds. So I'm going to achieve something physical today, which is going to be good. Thank you for watching. Please click like. Don't click like and subscribe because you already like us and you've already subscribed and you're Patreon supporters. So which means you're automatically cooler than all of the other cats. Have a good day. Oh, have you seen my new present? Thank you very much, Mike. What's that? Ben's awesome sauce. Can you see? Can you see? Can you see? Goes with my mug. Where's my mug? Come on. Ben's Cool Beans. You guys are fantastic. So, yeah. I'll see you soon. Be good. You cool cats.